What's up, folks? Your favorite sorcerer over these Sopex. How you doing? In this video, I want to talk about why the underworld is the home of power. Why are the dark gods the emissaries of power? Why is the underworld the source of our magical strength and magical power? Why is that so? Do we just use these dark archetypes and this dark aesthetic and all of that stuff? Do we just use that to be different or rebellious? No, like what's the reason for that? Why is magic and the occult often associated with that? And I'm going to give you my take on that in this video. So there are many creation myths, right? But I'm going to stick here to the creation myth of the Kabbalah and specifically the Tree of Life. So the legend goes that before the current Tree of Life, there was a more balanced Tree of Life, actually in the shape of more of a diamond. If you're familiar with the image of the Tree of Life, it's today it's an imbalanced one. Okay, there's an imbalanced one, but before that, there was a more balanced one. And what created the shift? That was the rebellion of the adversarial resistance to the natural order that was installed by God, essentially. There was no individuation in the sense of an individual will, but in this perfectly constructed diamond-shaped existence. And of course, the different spheres represent different layers of existence, you could say, different states of consciousness, different vibrations, different frequencies. All of that was in perfect harmony. And the creator, the Godhead, was of course on top, and everything danced to his tune. Until the adversary said non serviam. Non serviam is Latin for I will not serve. And at that point, this adversarial current rebelled and destroyed the cosmic order. But it didn't really destroy the cosmic order. It led to a rebellion, and you know that as a rebellion in heaven, right? And it created the fallen angels and the ones that stuck with God, so to speak. And as a result of that, the physical world was born. Yeah, the physical world was born. Malkuth, which is kind of like the bottom of the Tree of Life. And at the same time, the Qliphoth were born, which became the pandemonium and the home of all the fallen angels. Now, what does that mean for us? See, magic is the path of power. I've talked about that many, many times. There are different spiritual paths, and three categories of those paths. There's the religious path, which would essentially be the one of seeking alignment with that creator impulse. And then there's the path of the mystic, which seeks union with the divine through mystical experiences. And then there's magic, or sorcery, whatever you want to call that. And when it comes to magic, there's a practice which is purely concerned with accumulating power, and then there's also a sort of like a spiritual part to it as well, which is what we're talking about right now. And that is the path of power, which is you want to complete the fall. A monotheistic religion like Judaism, like Christianity, like Islam and all that stuff, they're concerned with the followers of that, whether they're aware of it or not. They're concerned with repairing the damage that has been done by the adversary and the adversarial current. And they're seeking forgiveness for that. They're seeking forgiveness. This is where they follow God's law, and they hope that through their devotion and through their following of God's law, they can repair that damage within themselves and reunite with the Creator. Those that are on our path, whether you know it or not, are trying to complete this fall. We're going into complete individuation by strengthening our own will to the point where we can create our own. I know those are big words, but we're talking about creating our own worlds, universes. Of course, not in the physical. We're talking about our own spiritual universes and attain immortality in the spiritual. Create our own vessels that maintain themselves and can maintain themselves to go on and create our own divine selves. That's what's called apotheosis, or self-deification, right? Now, this is the goal of any serious magician, really, in my opinion. So we're trying to complete the fall. So if you maybe prefer a more mundane perspective, I wouldn't say it's necessarily mundane, but it's like a perspective of a non-occultist or non-magician, so to speak. You might like Nietzsche's philosophy, and in particular his concept of the will to power. His idea of the will to power was a force, an underlying force that permeates all of life and is in fact the source of life. And this psychological, psychosexual force, whatever, was a pure will to dominate. And as long as it could use vessels to dominate and to expand itself, it created a sense of meaning for the creature. And he said that certain people were in touch with that and others were not in touch with that. And he also said something very, very interesting, which is going to allow us to tie this back to the adversarial current. And I'm not even sure if Nietzsche was using Freudian psychology and all that stuff, right? But it would make sense. Maybe he was aware of it, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe you can comment on that under this video. But he said that just by suppressing this will to power through, let's say, Christianity, because Christianity and then just most other religious paths suppress this will to power, but it doesn't get lost. It's just suppressed. In every Newtonian law states that every force creates its opposite force as well, right? And this law definitely applies to the psyche as well. Anything that you repress is not lost, it's just suppressed. And it will find its way in somewhere or another. Now, Nietzsche was of the opinion that most people had a slave morality, and very, very few people had a master morality, which is essentially those who are in touch with their will to power and those that are cut off from it. But I mean, you can look that up yourself. I'm not going to go into Nietzsche's philosophy, right? But the suppression part makes a lot of sense in our work, right? Because when you look at the tree of life and the cliffoth that are created as a response to the rebellious adversary, you could really make a connection between the two. Right? Now, how does magic actually work? One model that explains this very, very well is essentially we have our own individualized consciousness, and that individualized consciousness has a certain expansion, certain awareness. So our individuation has a certain expansion to it. Now, there's Also the macrocosm versus the microcosm, which is this individual expansion. The macrocosm is essentially a huge energy field that consists of many different currents, frequencies, archetypes, and so on and so forth. Now, these archetypes are what we use to communicate and interact with this greater consciousness system. We have our own individualized consciousness, and since we can't directly access these greater forces, we perceive them, interact with them, interpret them as archetypes. Now, the magical work is essentially, for a short amount of time, opening the individualized consciousness up to a greater force, working with that force, and through that, changing the greater consciousness system, which will lead to a change in the very fabric of reality. You change physical reality by interacting with forces that are collective, so to speak. They're beyond your own individuality, even though they also run through you because you have those same impulses within you. You see what I mean? Hopefully that's making sense to you here. So suppression in that context is things that you, for whatever reason, have lost access to. Now, when it comes to the adversarial current, it means that you are against whatever there is. Otherwise, you wouldn't want to change it. You see reality play out in whatever way, and you decide, I don't want this to be like this. I want it to be differently. Whether you actually realize that consciously or not, you are rebelling against the will of God. Because the will of God is essentially like everything playing out the way it does. But you decide, no, I want it to be different. This is why the scientific mind or the scientific intellect is also adversarial. Lucifer, for example, represents the intellect that has been strengthened, intellect that has been trained. Right? So the scientific mind that you have developed can discern and find out secrets about how this reality works, and can then change it through something that is more mundane, but at the same time, of course, also metaphysically and magically. So we have been, to a large extent, cut off from our own power. You see. And by being cut off, it becomes part of the underworld, becomes unseen, becomes hidden. But this is exactly where all the power lies. If you are cut off from something, it has become a taboo. It is not accessible. There's a resistance to access it. And therefore, it gains this presence and this atmosphere of the forbidden. Now, there's a difference between ethics and morals, and morals are defined, or can be defined, as essentially what a group considers, a specific group considers right. Another group could consider that completely wrong. You see what I mean? So that's something very relative, but this means that the things that contain the most power in a magical sense, and the entities that are most capable in gaining you power over reality, are in the hidden, they're in the shadows. They're part of the suppressed current that will require you to break certain taboos in your mind, to access your will to power, to access your connection with these forces of the underworld. You know. Now, there used to be cultures in which those entities would not be part of the underworld at all. They would be integrated into their psyche. But that is not the case in our Judeo-Christian tradition here. You know, if you were raised in, let's call it roughly speaking, the West, you are under a heavy spell cast onto you by a desert religion. You know, and I mean, make your pick. Which one? But this is why the underworld and the symbology that we use that refers to those dark gods and adversarial currents and the taboo and the hidden, the dark. That is why that contains the most power. And that is also why embracing them and connecting to them and working with them in your magical practice, in your sorcery, will give you the most power to affect reality. Now, I want to encourage you to explore this side of reality and of your psyche and of this magical universe. See, I have talked in earlier videos about how magic actually works and how behind the physical expression of reality, there are always non-physical things that are connected to the physical expression of things. So behind any physical event, person, situation, there's always an invisible energy field. And in order for the magician to change the physical expression of those things, he must change and conquer the energy field that is behind that physical expression. And the adversarial current is the very impulse to empower yourself and to conquer. The will to power is encoded in that. Remember, the fall happened when the adversarial current or the adversarial power said the individual will is more important than the will of the creator. And if you're practicing magic and if you're doing this seriously, that's what you're embodying every single day. Your individual will is more important to you than the will of God that is evidenced by you even using magic to change things around you. You dare to want to change things. If you were truly a follower of God and God's will, and you truly respect it, what you would do is you would, oh, you have heart disease, you have liver failure, don't even go to the hospital. Why? Because it's God's will. He controls everything, right? So if you fucking die of, intoxication, are you going to mess with God? You're going to tell the big guy that this is not okay? Who are you to think that? Who the fuck do you think you are, huh? Right? So, obviously, you're already on this path. And most of you are actually practicing magicians, which I love. That's great. And if you're consciously working with adversarial forces, my friend, you're definitely on the other side. So, the adversarial current, the archetypes that are connected to it, the dark gods, the underworld, the pandemonium, all of that, are all reflections of this will that we use every day to conquer those energy fields, to conquer the invisible in order to reap the rewards in the physical. This is all interconnected. So, this is why the archetypes that we use are the way they are. This is why the rituals that we do are the way they are. This is why the aesthetics that we use are the way they are. And hopefully this message could clarify this to you, because a lot of people are still kind of like, scared, and they don't they don't know what to make of it. But I tell you what, this is the path of power, and if you want power, you got to embody it in some way or another. And hopefully this video gives you inspiration on how to do that. With that being said, hopefully you got something out of this, and I talk to you soon, my friend. Bye bye. Bye bye.